Hey guys, it's Charlene. Today I'm going to be sharing 5 different fun ways to use paper strips on your cards. Now, I was lucky enough to receive a set of the Floral Friendship Collection from Spellbinders, and I was playing with all these beautiful products, and I thought, you know what, I'm going to put together a fun video with paper strips. First, I want to give you a quick look at part of the collection, the items that I'm going to be using today. So this first package here is die cut sentiments, and there are 154 different die cuts, and there are words, there are large pieces with full phrases, there's banners, and then there's also kind of cute little die cut images, not as many images though in that part. Here, there is a whole separate set that coordinates with 180 different die cut shapes. So you've got birds and floral bouquets, individual flowers, big, small. And what's really, really pretty is there's a lot of gold foiling. There are gold foiling accents on the sentiments as well as on many of the die cut shapes. So really pretty. There's also these gorgeous iridescent gemstones. They come in 3 different sizes. I think there's 72. And these butterflies, you guys, I can't get over these butterflies. There's 8-dimensional butterfly stickers in that. And then the 6x6 pattern paper pad, really pretty. Again, lots of foil accents on the pattern paper, as well as foil accents even on those butterfly stickers. There are 10 different patterns on the pattern paper, so lots of different options. For today, I'm going to be using strip dies, but you also could cut your paper strips using a paper trimmer, whatever works better for you. I really like the strip dies because they kind of round the edges of your strips and it looks really pretty on your card. So you can see I cut out multiple different wider strips and then multiple different thin strips using different patterns from the pattern paper pad. And I'm just using some repositionable dot runner here, and I'm going to go ahead and run it along the back of the paper strip. And I'm going to line these up all the way across the front of an A2 size card panel. So that's 4¼ inches by 5½ inches. Now, I used 5 different pattern paper pieces, but you could use all 10. You could choose just like 2, whatever you want to use. I barely put a dent in the paper pad with all of these pattern paper strips. And if you already have some strips in your stash, you could cut them down and do these exact same techniques. So I like to save my paper strips from my paper pads, and it doesn't have to be pattern paper. It could be solid color cardstock too. And every once in a while, cut them down into strips and do fun different cards. So I've run the pattern paper strips all the way along that piece of cardstock. Really simple to do. And then once I have it all the way to the top, you can see there's a little bit of a gap at the top. No big deal. I'm going to trim that off anyway. I'm just coming in here and trimming off the excess pattern paper. And then I am going to cut down this entire panel because I want it to have a border mat with another piece of cardstock for one of the cards I'm going to be doing later. But the first way you can use your pattern paper strips is by creating a sheet like this and then die cutting shapes. So you could cut out circles or hearts or stars, whatever kind of dies you have in your stash. I'm only going to cut out one oval right from the center. So you can see there I did adhere the whole panel to the front of an A2 size card base, and this is now where I'm going to cut out that oval from the center. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to open the card base when I run this through my die cut machine and just put the cutting plate over the side that has the oval in the top. And you'll see why later when we get started on the second card. So I'm going to take that oval out of there, and now I have a nice piece of cardstock. All of the colored cardstock I'm using today is the Wildflower Assorted Pack Color Essentials from Spellbinders. Those colors seem to go together really well with the Floral Friendship Collection. So I've cut out a piece, I've adhered that to my card base, and now I'm just popping up the oval right in the center with some foam tape. I added a sentiment as well as several of the die cut shapes and then a few of those iridescent gemstones. Super easy to put a card together, and you can just add a little bit of texture and dimension by popping up some of the pieces. So like I popped up some of the flowers and I popped up the butterfly, but the leaves, I just glued those directly to the card base, and there you can see I added a sentiment inside as well. So now on to the second card. This was actually my very first thought when I saw all of this stuff. I said, oh my gosh, I need to do a window card and I need to put a butterfly in the center because I wanted you to be able to open up the card and still see the butterfly. These butterflies are really cool. They are made out of kind of like an acetate, but they lay flat in your card because they push down. But when you open or pull the card out of the envelope, they pop up. So pretty. And like I said, they do have some of the foiling accents on there as well. I did look and see as I was recording this video, and it looks like they are out of stock at several places. A couple of places still have them in stock. I'll list down in the description all the different places that have them, and you can just check and see if they're in stock, if that's something that you're interested in looking at. So I'm using this beautiful gold foiled sentiment here that says amazing. And then I'm using that small rectangle square you can see at the top that says you are. And I'm going to put that up over the butterfly. I really like the sentiment pack because it does contain a good variety of sentiments. So it has birthday, it has sympathy, it has thanks, it has just because kind of styles of sentiments. Really nice to have on hand, especially if you need to put together some kind of quick card. So I'm just popping everything up here on some foam tape. I've popped up the sentiment. I'm going to pop these flowers up as well. For a variation on the window card, you also could put your sentiment in the center, so that way when you open the card, you still see that same sentiment. That's a fun way to do it too. And I think you could use just about any shape here. You don't necessarily need to use an oval for the window card. You could use a rectangle, you could use a heart, you could use a star. You just want to make sure it's big enough that you could stamp a sentiment or put a pre-made sentiment die cut like this, or a sticker, or whatever it is that you're wanting to be able to show when you open the card. So I added a few gemstones as well as a few little items on the inside of the card, and it looks so pretty. Look when you open that card, you guys. I love that effect that you get to see the butterfly no matter what. I think it's so pretty. All right, we're going to move on to the third way to use paper strips on your cards. And I'm going to kind of dress this one up a little bit. I'm using the Sun Rays embossing folder from Spellbinders here, and I'm going to create a starburst pattern with my paper strips. So this is a really easy way to use your paper strips. This in particular works really well as if you have paper strips that are different sizes too. So you could kind of chop up whatever you have in your stash into strips and then create this starburst pattern. And it doesn't have to be a perfect starburst pattern. I'm kind of running mine along the little in between parts of the embossing folder because I thought this embossing folder would make such a nice detail with the starburst pattern. But I've definitely made this card as well without any kind of embossing folder, and it looks amazing. So I'm using one of the sentiment die cuts here, and it's kind of a cool layered sentiment. So it's got a frame and an inset, and then the sentiment in the center. You can see over there on the left is the frame. So you just had to kind of lightly pop these apart. And what's fun about it is then you can make it into a dimensional kind of sentiment piece. So what I did is I glued down the center portion, or the in-between portion, and then I popped up the center sentiment piece with foam tape. And now I am also going to pop up the frame with foam tape as well. And when you have these kind of pieces, you just want to make sure that you have everything aligned and straight and that the pattern still continues like it's supposed to. So just double check that before you put anything down. But there you can see how fun that looks with all that dimension. And then I'm just going to trim this piece down a little bit. I probably should have done that before I put the sentiment piece on there, but it all worked out. And I've cut it down so that it's going to have about a 1/16 of an inch border all the way around. And I'm using a piece of colored cardstock that I thought coordinated well. And I've used some double-sided adhesive tape from scrapbook.com here. And you can see it makes it really easy to line things up. I've talked about this in other videos, but essentially you just fold down part way and then you can set it on your paper, push down, pull it up, and then remove the rest of the release tape. So now I'm using some liquid adhesive and I'm gluing this onto the card base. I'm using a colored card base for this card because I wanted to pick up all of those colors in the patterned paper strips. And I thought this looked really pretty. No extra accents on the front, but I did add a few of the different die cuts on the inside. All right, moving on to our next card here. I'm going to be using the Stitched High die from Spellbinders for this, but I'm not going to be using it as intended. What I'm actually doing here, I'm going to tape the letters in place to the shadow die. So if you use this as it's kind of intended, you would cut out the high, which would create a shadow, and then you would cut out the letters, which would create the items that you would kind of glue or pop up on top of the shadow. Instead, what I want is I want to get an outline of the entire high. So you can see there, because I taped them together, I was able to cut out just a outline of the word high. I cut out 3 and then I glued those all together to create a little bit of dimension, because the technique here I want to show you is that you can put pattern paper strips behind die cuts and it creates a really fun look because you see all of that beautiful color coming through behind the die cuts. Now, I'm not going to trim around the die cut, but that's something you could absolutely do. You could glue the pattern paper strips to the back of the die cut and then trim around the edges so that you only see the pattern paper behind the die cut. But I wanted to kind of simultaneously create a pattern by putting angled strips on the front of the card, but also have those beautiful strips kind of show through, and it allows me to use a white die cut and it still pops off the page because you have all the colors and patterns behind it. I did not take the strips all the way across because I thought it gave it a more interesting look to have it just on a portion of the card. And because it is underneath most of that white die cut, it doesn't really throw things off at all that there is some white on this card. So more butterflies. These butterflies are so pretty. I decided to go ahead and stick 3 on top of this card. Certainly the card would have looked very pretty without the butterflies, but I just thought these butterflies were gorgeous. So I wanted to use them at least on a couple of the cards that I made today. So again, popping these up around that word die outline that I kind of created using the Stitched High. And I decided at this point that I didn't want that big white space to be completely white towards the top. So I brought in one more paper strip and brought it along that same angle pattern, and then I just trimmed off the edges. I added a few of those iridescent gemstones and one of the large sentiment die cuts on the inside as well. All right, the next technique is a fun one, and I don't know, I think maybe this is my favorite card, but you guys will have to let me know down in the comments which one is your favorite card or other ways that you've used paper strips. I'm always interested to hear how people are out there creating. So for this card, we're doing a partial fold card. I'm not sure if that's like technically what you would call it. I don't know what the word is for this type of card, but essentially you're going to have a smaller front flap than a back flap. So I've taken an A2 size card base here and I cut off a portion of the front flap of the card. And then I've added some dot runner all along the exposed area that's actually the inside of the card. And now I've come in and I've just done a repeating pattern of the very thin paper strips here, and I'm running them all the way along that edge. And I am coming in with my bone folder because I really want to make sure these are adhered well down to that card because they are so small. Now all I need to do is trim off the excess, and then I'm also going to trim off that little bit of white space that was left at the edge of the paper strips. So the final card is just slightly smaller than A2 size, but no one's ever going to notice that at all. So just something to keep in mind when you're choosing the paper strips and the size amount that you want that open inside space to be. So what's fun about this card is you see the paper strips from the front, but then when you open the card, you're still going to see the paper strips because they're not moving at all. So I've taken a nice large sentiment die cut here. I've popped it up on some foam tape, but I did not remove the release tape from the right hand side. So when you open this, it's that release tape is still on the foam tape on the right side. And that's what is allowing you to keep that sentiment or whatever you use in that space still popped up. You don't want to remove that release tape because then it'll just stick onto the inside of your card, and that would be no good. You wouldn't be able to open the card. So I used a couple of the die cuts. I used a few floral pieces. I used a few leaf pieces, and I've popped up the leaf pieces using some foam tape there. And now I'm just going to come in here and add some of those iridescent gemstones to kind of bring a little bit of bling and color to the left-hand side of the card that goes with those gorgeous paper strips on the right. There's a lot going on this card, but I think it's so pretty. And you still have plenty of space on the inside to write your personal message, whatever you want to do there. So quick recap here, you can die cut out shapes using pattern paper strips or regular paper strips. You could create a window card. You can create patterns such as the Starburst pattern. You can use them to back a word die or some type of die cut. And you could also use them on the inside of the card with a partial front flap. All right, guys, I hope you picked up some fun tips and tricks today. Thank you so much for watching. Please be sure to like and subscribe, as well as hit that notification bell so that I can continue bringing you more crafty content in the future. Until next time, happy crafting.